It isn't real. Bring it down on your brother's head.
Sometimes the way a movie chooses to market itself can be very interesting. You know, the points that they focus on, the points that they don't focus on, or the things you see or that they deliberately kind of hold back, kind of tells a lot about what they think about the story. It's not an easy game to be sure, but sometimes it ends up being a little more fascinating than the movie itself. The Inhabitant is a 2022 movie about a series of supernatural events that reveal a dark truth behind a tormented teenager. You know, it's funny. I try to go into movies as cold as I possibly can. Now, I generally don't watch a lot of trailers, and so usually I'll just read a log line and then kind of go from there. I mean, sometimes I'll watch maybe the first 10 seconds of a trailer just to sort of get a feel for the production value of a movie. I read the log line for this, which is the same one that I just read at the top here, and I thought it was a simple but interesting premise, and the cast looked pretty solid, so I figured I'd kind of give it a shot. Now, I'm originally from Southeastern Mass, and so I may have mentioned in a previous video that I have a soft spot for movies that were set there. So I kind of had a weird, exciting reaction when the words Fall River, Mass came on the screen. I grew up right near Fall River. So I saw Fall River and I cheered. And then I saw the words Lizzie Borden and I went, "Aw." So, I mean, here's the thing. Like, I heard so much about Lizzie Borden growing up. I mean, this movie seems to posit that everyone in the area is terrified of her and her legend. And that just could not be further from the truth. I mean, it's a rough, true story to be sure, but the mysticism and creepiness around that particular story is kind of lost on me. So I would take that into some consideration when you watch the rest of this review. But I do find it interesting that Lizzie Borden was not mentioned in the log line of this movie. Telling? I don't know, maybe. That said, this might be one of the worst scripts I've seen in a while. Like, it's terrible. Like, the only thing that saves it somewhat is the performances of the three leads and one of the supporting cast. But let's get into this. This movie's centered around Tara, who is a 17-year-old high school student and has also a little independent seamstress business. She also happens to be the descendant of Lizzie Borden herself. Anyway, legend has it that the Lizzie Borden curse has been handed down from generation to generation and landed most recently on Tara's aunt, who drowned her infant son and now resides in a mental hospital. Tara lives at home with her mom, father, two siblings, a little brother, and a baby brother. And recently, Tara has started having disturbing dreams that have then morphed into visions while she is awake. These visions center around Lizzie and Tara taking an axe to that little baby brother. All right, but I'm kind of getting a little ahead of myself here a bit. This movie actually starts up with this elongated sequence of a woman going for a run and then getting hacked up by a strange woman in a white dress. Anyway, so Tara's visions of her hurting her own family continue to get worse and worse until she starts having kind of short conversations with the ghost of Lizzie herself. Now, in the meantime, her mother, played by the always amazing Leslie Bibb, is concerned because her sister went insane when she was only 16, and Tara is a year older and clearly going through something. Tara is stressed because her boyfriend's going to a different college than her, and she had to quit her babysitting job because the dad had sent some inappropriate text messages to her. That also happens to be the husband of the woman who was murdered in the cold open. Ah, now we're getting somewhere. As Lizzie's dealing with this stress, her rivals start getting killed by this woman in a white dress with an axe, putting Tara right in the crosshairs of the police. Or at least you would think that. But here the police might be the worst detectives possible. Like they question her once or twice without any real theories or progress in the case. They just sort of show up when they need to, but they don't add any tension or stakes or ticking clock to really anything. They're also played by two of the most boring actors on the planet. I will say it probably was not their fault, and I'll circle back to that in sort of a minute. I do want to mention something I just didn't kind of get about the rivals thing. So Lily has a fight with someone at school, and that girl gets killed. and then the creepy husband guy gets killed as well. Okay, those make sense. But why did the wife in the opening scene get killed? I still don't kind of understand that. Anyway, Lizzie begins to lose her mind and start becoming fascinated with the Borden family curse. And it even actually takes a trip to the Lizzie Borden house, which is now a bed and breakfast, in order to stay the night. By the way, that is a real place in Fall River, FYI. After she checks in, she begins to feel somewhat possessed by Lizzie Borden and has several incidents while in the house itself, culminating with her attacking the proprietor of the house. Now, I'm not really sure why she wasn't arrested after attacking the owner of the house. It seems like something the detectives would be kind of interested in, but nope. She attacks her, and then they just let her go without anyone following up. No one seems to care. All right, so brief spoilers coming up, so do the skip thing if you don't want to hear this. All of this kind of comes to a head when her best friend, who is pining hardcore for Tara, is tasked with going into Tara's basement to dig out all of her old clothes that she's made and throw them away because Tara wants to be done with the whole Lizzie Borden thing, and her seamstressing reminds her of that, I guess. However, when the friend opens up the chest, she finds a bloody white dress from the killings, which then gets her killed in the process. Surprise! It's the mother. She's been doing it all along. She set her sister up all those years ago and then did nothing for 18 years, raised a family, and then decided to just pull the pin and blow everything up. Also, she thinks Tara means to get rid of her and marry the father in order to replace her as mother in this family. That's also why she did it. Makes perfect sense. The thing that makes me feel conflicted on this movie is because once the mother fully embraces the crazy and is hunting Tara, it's actually quite enjoyable to watch. Like, Bib is fantastic as a deranged psychopath.
Oh, not you. I think I'm gonna go find Caleb.
And it's just kind of fun watching her chew the scenery. It's a shame that it was just the last 15 minutes of the movie. I would have loved to see a whole movie centered around her and her fight with sanity. However, it's fairly short-lived, and the inept detectives show up after the dad calls 911 and then just shoot her. So they still didn't figure anything out. They just came when the dad called. Completely useless. Also, somehow the sister escaped from the mental institution so that she could be a dead body in the kitchen. I still don't get that either, but just don't think about that at all. This whole movie felt like the craft level of a sophomore film student who just happened to get to make a big budget movie. And when I say big budget, this was reportedly $17 million. That's insane how poorly this was made for that amount of money. From the bad script to the flat acting to the shoddy camera work and the rough editing, it's like handing the keys for a Mercedes to a 16-year-old kid. To be fair, I have not seen any of the director's previous stuff, but this movie does not inspire much confidence. And part of that is there's this huge disconnect between the more well-known actors and the unknown actors. Now, all right, usually in film, especially in horror, you get a lot of lesser-known actors or actors that I have never seen before, but that's a good thing, as I don't know how many times I've watched a movie and thought, I've never seen this person, but they really nailed it. Certainly on a higher budget film, you get higher priced talent or actors that are sort of on the rise. And this is no different with the leads, which are Odessa Azion, I think I'm pronouncing that right, Azion, Leslie Bibb, and Dermott Mulroney. And they're all really solid, especially Bibb, who I mentioned before, really goes for it at the end of this movie in a way that is just so fun to watch. It's a shame she doesn't really do much in the first half of this film because it's really wasted. Dermott Mulroney is fine, but he feels like he's acting in a different movie half the time. Like, he doesn't seem to interact with anyone and does some really kind of strange things. However, this movie has the unfortunate distinction of almost every character that is not a known actor is either flat as hell or just plain terrible. With the exception of the friend played by Lizzie Broadway. I've never seen her before, but she actually did a really good job. And I put this squarely on the shoulders of the director. Listen, when you're casting people with less experience, sometimes you'll just get someone who doesn't do a good job on the day of. Fine. But when it's everyone that doesn't have a solid foundation of what they're doing, then that's on the director. Like, either he isn't casting well, or he isn't giving what the actors need well enough. This is also probably why Dermott Mulroney is so weird in this. As an example, let me talk about the therapy scene. The setup here is Tara's mother convinces her to go and see a therapist after school.
Tara, having a good day?
First off, Tara walks in and the therapist is typing on a computer. Now, normally a therapist who has an appointment with a client isn't trying to multitask during a session and should be better prepared. But then as soon as Sarah sits down, the therapist starts asking these sort of very antagonizing questions and statements about how Tara could be troubled and may need medication, etc. Now, this woman is jumping to some hard conclusions without Tara really saying much. Then at one point, she's still kind of clicking away on her computer, and Tara says something about that.
What are you typing?
Notes. So I can review them later.
All right. I mean, putting aside the fact that typing on a computer for notes during a therapy session is horrible bedside manner for a shrink. But then she also writes notes down on a legal pad with a pen. Why are you taking notes twice? Like, it all feels like the director wanted a close-up shot of her writing something down, but then also wanted the computer on the desk so it didn't look so empty. So they just went with both. Of course, it didn't help that the actress playing the therapist is about as interesting as room temperature water. Once again, may not be her fault. I can't really decide if this movie feels more that it was horribly written or that it was like a hatchet job and someone went through and removed every other page of the script. And yes, that's a Lizzie Borden joke. You're welcome. There are so many times that characters kind of slingshot between emotions inside single scenes. Like this one where Susie, the best friend who has a huge crush on Tara, but won't say, goes from talking lightheartedly to her on the phone to completely breaking down in tears and cutting herself within 30 seconds. Then there's also when people just disappear from moment to moment. Like the scene where Tara is outside making out with her boyfriend and she sees someone in her room upstairs. She then immediately runs into her room and sees no one, but then she just stays there. And she yells at her mother and then sits on her bed and stays in her room. And the boyfriend is just gone. She doesn't go back out. He doesn't come in. If they had just cut to her walking in the room and seeing it empty, that would have been fine. But this scene goes on so long that it's crazy there's no mention of the boyfriend. I really wanted them to cut to outside and just see the boyfriend sitting alone on the bench and all the lights in the house just turn off. Forgotten. Also, this has nothing to really do with anything, but I feel like I had to mention it. Apparently, someone has a pretty big clothing fetish in this movie because there are 2 separate scenes with 2 separate actors where a character either has sex with or uses clothing as an accomplice to a sexual act. It's very strange, and I felt bad for the actors. Bottom line is, this movie is just horribly mismanaged. The script, the production, all of it. The only saving grace is that the main cast delivers the best performance I think they can with what they had. But none of that saves the enormous amount of money that was spent on this. It might have been an interesting idea, but it's just rammed through in the worst ways possible. Apparently, the writer of this film has written and produced a lot of animal and shark documentaries, which in a strange way kind of makes sense because no one talks like a human here either. I'd give this movie a C-, but let me know what you think.